Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of week 29. In this lesson, we are going to tie up all we've been doing from weeks 20 up until now, and then we are going to look at how to build our authentication system and then create a client profile. My name is Mildred. What we want to do is we want to have something like a register page where we create our account before we can log in. But in production, we will not have this register page. You want an administrator to create accounts for the user of the system. But for the purpose of us understanding how to do this, we are going to do it here. And when we get to the advanced course that we are building for production in course 3, then we'll look at how to do role and access control. So before this lesson, I have created my directory. I have created my models file. I have created my app file. The app file is empty. We're going to walk through it today. And I have created all of the different templates that I need. What we are doing here is to create a data collection system. We want a user who has an account to log in. We want successful login to redirect to the home page where the user can register a new client or retrieve a client information for either further entry, for updates, for delete, and all of those operations. We want to put in a little bit of checks that a user who already has an account during registration, a new account should not be created. If a client already has an account or profile created, a new profile should not be created for the client and things like that. So to recap, we looked previously in week 20 that we have to install Python higher than 3.8 to be able to use Flask. You create your virtual environment. Refer to week 20 resource to see how you create your directory and your virtual environment within the directory of your choice, and then how to activate that virtual environment and install Flask. Once Flask is installed, then we can install other packages like our MySQL client and Flask MySQL DB connector. In week 22, we looked at how to use all of that. And when we got to week 25, we looked at how to plan a model based on a form, and we used SQL Alchemy and how to do the mappings. Now, while there is no best method, I prefer to use SQL Alchemy. So that is methods used in week 25, and that's the method we are going to use going forward. Now, while there are different ways of doing the same thing, you want to use methods that you can use across different frameworks. So in case we are not using Flask, we are using something like Fast API. You want to use SQL Alchemy, you don't want your ORM to be tied to your framework. So that's the reason I chose SQL Alchemy. And so you want to refer to week 25 until your connection the way we did it in week 25. Now let's tie it all together. Let's recap. This is not a front-end course, and if you want to know more details about creating your HTML files, styling your forms, and validating your forms with JavaScript, you have to take course 1, which is the prerequisite course for this course. The first thing I did here was to create a base file. And what I want to do with the base file is to have all of the files in the root, like all of the files that are accessible to everyone without authentication, to inherit from this file. It will control what we have as the sidebar, as the top navigation, and also the content or the JavaScript and the content and the footer. I want to have another base file which will control every page that requires authentication. So those pages will inherit this because they have a different set of navigation that requires that a session is running. I have my forms created. This is my congenital syphilis form. We will create the hepatitis form and the chlamydia and gonorrhea form. But for the purpose of this lesson, and in order not to waste time, I will work only with the congenital syphilis form. And then for your assignment 13, you are going to do your hepatitis and your STI forms and the data collection. Let's look at how the base file was created. I use blocks to allow the pages that inherit from this to be able to add more content to the head. So if there's more metadata to be added, we want it added, and so we just call the block. Like for instance, I have the index page. I wanted to add the description, so I put it within the block head, which is inherited from this. I also have a block title that is empty because I want the page that inherits to set the title for the page, and also style sheet just in case we have new style sheets specific to the new page. Let's say, for instance, the login page has a new style sheet. We want to put that within block style sheet on the page that inherits from the base file. And then we put all of the tags that we want common in all files. Whenever you see block, it means that we are keeping placeholder for the child files to be able to insert something here or to be able to define what the content of the page will be. We also have that for JavaScript and for footer. So there's no fixed way of doing this. When you build yours, if there's anything you want to have control over from the child page, you want to use blocks for those stuff. And anything you want to be inherited by all the children, you want to have them outside of the blocks, but you want to put the blocks above them like this for the child to be able to add content to those parts. When this is done, we have the index page, which extends the base.html file, which means it includes that base file. We want to add description, so we put it in the block head that we define. I just named the block. You can just use block without head, so I can end blocks and understand what exactly I'm doing. So sometimes you want to name your blocks just to avoid confusion and for the sake of neatness. I set my title and I set the style sheet that I want to use to insert icons. I also put my content block, which is going to hold the main page content for that page. So you see that the base file sets the side navigation and the top navigation for this page. I didn't need to define that here anymore, since the base file already has that defined. So you have all of this code in your course resource for the week, so you can go through them to have a deeper understanding or try them out. We have the login page, which is part of the navigation that we have. So when we go to the base file, I want to show you how the navigation looks. Now, on the side navigation, we created the home page, which is the root route. When a user hits the root, it always redirects to the home. About, we want it to go to the about route, which will render the about.html file, and overview will render the overview page like that. When we get to the top navigation, we want the login route to control the login page, profile route to control the profile page. Here there is no route for this because we've not created this, but basically we have the home and the login, and then we have a button controlled by JavaScript that will collapse the sidebar if we don't want to see the sidebar. So knowing that this is the route that we defined, because we use href, so we'll put a route. If we're using URL4, then we put the function name. So we use this /login, which is going to look for the login route on the app file. If I go to the homebase.html, that's exactly the same thing here. When I /sti, which is going to look for the /sti endpoint or route on the app page, the same thing with this, the same with this, the same with that. So we don't have anything on our app file, but we know exactly what we defined as the route that we want to create for this. So I did this in advance. So whenever we go back to our app file and we want to start creating routes, we have to take note of how we name them on the files that uses them. So let's start. I have a login page, and what I want to do first is to be able to have a form displayed that when a user supplies a username and password, it checks the database and it authenticates the user if it matches. But before you can log in, you need to register a user, and so I have a register page. The register file holds a form that does collect username, confirm the username, password, confirm the password. So when we click register, we expect that the register route is going to validate this input, check if the confirm and the original matches, and then send it to the database. If we want to do a little bit of encryption, we can also do it at this time. So let's go and look at how to create our app file. We've done this in other lessons, but we want to start afresh for us to understand. I want to import all of what I need. The first thing I will import here is #lib, and because I'm going to use this to hash the password for us to be able to put an encrypted password in the database. Before I import #lib, I want to import Flask. So let's say from Flask, import Flask. I want to import Flask, render template. I want to import request, redirect URL for session. I'm not going to use Flash. From SQL Alchemy, I want to import create engine. I also want to import text from SQL Alchemy. And from models, I want to import all of the models. So now we've seen how to do all of this. Since this is just an import statement, we can leave it at the top or leave it where it is. So once we go to course 3 and we are trying to test our file, create our file for production, there are standards, and there are different Python standards that we want to keep to, that we use to validate all of our files and our code to be structured properly to meet particular standard. And these are things you will learn in course 3 as advanced course, where you begin to develop your systems for production that will be ready to be used in the software market. So we want to sign the session key. And we have said in previous lesson that we use the app.secret key to make sure that the session cookies are signed to prevent any attack. So whatever your key is should be some super secret key and nobody else will know. So you put in whatever key you have, alphanumeric, anything complex that will sign the key. We want to be able to connect to the database. We use app.config, and what we'll do is we want to get MySQL database URI. We are using MySQL connector. So I'll use MySQL plus the connector, and then I want to have the username is root. The password of the username is, my password is course123 for this course. My host is localhost. The port is 3306, and the name of my database is STIData. So recall that we created a database called STIData. If you've not created one, you head over to MySQL Workbench and create a database called MySQL Data, or any database you want, but that name must match this name. You can choose to put the port, which is default to 3306, if you choose to, or if you have a new port that is not 3306, which is the default port for MySQL, you can leave it blank. So now we have this, and then we want to do engine is equal to create engine app.config, and there's a square bracket here I'm typing, and there is a single quote here. So we want to create the engine, and so we use engine is equal to app.config like this, and then we have this here. So this should be correct. We can do echo equal to 3 if you want, and then we want to create a table. So assuming we have models in the model, we want to say base.meta.create engine, or from models.models we're importing all, so we can get the base. So the models file is in the models folder, and this is where we made a mistake. So every time you have whatever is supposed to be color coded not properly color coded, you want to check if your imports are correct and if you have imported everything you need. So this is basically the import we need and the connection that we need to do to be able to connect to the database. This is how we set up our app file to use SQL Alchemy to connect to the database. Once we've done this, we can create the root route. So we'll say add app.route, and we want the root route, and this will be def index. We want to render this template. So we have an index template. We want to have, let's look at the files we have. We have index, we have about, and we have overview. We want all of this to be accessible by the root. So let's say add app.route, and this is the about route. And we want to say def about. We want to render that template. We want to do that for the overview. So the reason we use / here for the root that binds to the index function, / about and overview. When we go to the base file, we can see that when we created all of these site navigation, we use / about / overview, and so we need to make sure that the route is named the same way with what we have used in the base file. So normally you want to create your route or before you do them in the base, or the base before the route, or make sure that the names match. Now that we've done this, let us try to start our server to make sure all is well before we start working on the authentication. So we want to start this in debug mode. We'll say Flask app.py debug 1. So I've not activated, so I'll activate first. So always remember that when you come on a new day, you have to activate your environment before you can start. venv/bin/activate, and then I will run. I don't know why access denied for user root or localhost using password yes. So what's my password? My password was course123. So you see why I'm having a problem? I specified root twice, so I had a typo. So always try to read your error messages here. The first time I cleared without reading, but this is the major error, which is telling me that it denied for user root and localhost using password. The typo made this whole password to look like my password was totally different, so it did not recognize my password to be able to log me on. So when I run that again, it should go successfully because I have corrected the typo. So take note of these errors. So I'm going to open this on my browser, and if all is well, we should have the page. So this is the page I have created. The base route has the home, the about, the overview. And then we have the home, we have the login, and the login is not found because I have no route created for it yet, or no endpoint. And I have the profile, which doesn't link anywhere for now. So we've set up the basic stuff that we need to do. So now we need to create a login. And from the login page, we will get a register. So let's go back to the app file. So now all of this I've created works fine so far. We have our app secret key. We have the configuration to the data for the SQL Alchemy database URI, which is your name of your relational database MySQL, plus the driver we are using is MySQL connector. The other ones you can use if you refer to previous week lessons where I did this. I showed you the different things you can install or the different ways you can connect. And we want to connect to the username, which is root, and the password for the username, which is the password for your MySQL workbench when you try to log in. At the host, which is localhost, you can specify the port if you are not using a default MySQL port of 3306, and then / the name of your database. And then you use the engine to create engine, and the creating engine is going to be with the variable that you set the connection string. To create all the models that you already have, you import from the models file, and it creates a table in the database. Then we created all of the root routes, which is the route for the landing page, for the about page, for the overview page. We want to create that for the login page. For the login page, we want to have both get and post method. If the person is connecting to the login form for the first time, we want to activate the get. If the person is trying to save something or send something to the database, like authenticate, we want it to use the post. So now that we have that, let's try to create the login route and see how it works. So note that before we can even log in, we need to be able to register. So we'll do the login first to be able to access the registration form, and then we're going to register. So now we have def login, and for this we want to first of all create a variable that holds our messages, whether success or failure messages. We want to check if a form was submitted, and we'll say if request.method is equal to post, and in the request we have a username and the password in the form, which means that if the person fills this form, the method is post. The name of this field is username. So if username is filled, if password is filled, and the person clicks the submit button and the method is post, that's what this means. If this happens, we want to get the username. We might convert it to lower just for us to be able to not have authentication problem, and then we have get the password. I'm going to delete all of this that Copilot put here so that we can type out what we want. So you can convert the username to whatever you want, or you can leave it as the user entered it to be case sensitive if you want, or you want our username to be lowercase. So whenever anybody enters, it converts to lowercase to be able to go through. So I always recommend you do this for usernames. Now, we want to decrypt a password because when we create the account, we want to encrypt a password. And what we are going to use is hashlib. So we decrypt the same way we encrypt. What I want to do is I want to hash the password using the password plus the secret key that I set up here. There are different methods of doing this. In production, I'm going to use AES. I'm not going to use this method. But for now, I'm going to do like this. I'll say hash is equal to password plus app.secret key. And then I'll say hash is equal to hashlib. Let's use SHA-256. We'll encode it like this. So I can decide to just stop at encode, and I'll put the new name now to be password. So rename password to be hash.regex. So let's say password, enter. So I'm going to explain this again once I do the registration. So what I'm doing here is to, first of all, I'll comment here, get the form values, and then when I get it, I want to decrypt the password, because the assumption is when we are registering the user, we are going to have this password encrypted. So we're going to decrypt. So we're doing things kind of in reverse, knowing that this password is going to be encrypted. So for us to be able to get it correct, it has to be decrypted when we are trying to retrieve it like that. We want to check if the username and password combination exists in the database already. So check if this user exists in the database. So I want to check, let's say with engine. So we're using context manager with engine.connect as con. We want to select, I'm not going to use this, I hate when Copilot does this. What I want to do first is to say result is similar, but I want to type it out so I can explain. Con.execute, and let's use text. And what we want to do here is I'll use the format string, and I will say select all from users where username is the username and password is the password. So I use this format string to just specify the variable username and the password. Now I'm not using password entered, I'm using the password that is decrypted, so that when it gets it from the database, it's decrypted. So this is uppercase, it's supposed to be lowercase. Sometimes when you import things like this from the same place, you can just import them as comma separated list instead of importing them separately. So these are things that we learn as we go along. So we have result is this, and what we do next here is we want to be able to say, let's say account is equal to, let's fetch one of it, let's commit. So once this is done, we want to check if the account exists. So we say for account, we want to now create session data so that we can access this session data from other routes. So the session logged in is true, session ID is account.id, session username is account.username. That's what we are going to use as the column names in the database. We want message to be logged in successful, and then we want to redirect to the home page. And let's say we want to redirect this to home, and we want it to have a message which is equal to the message. We want to set the message on the home page to be equal to message like this. If this is not the case, if the account is not found, we want to say incorrect username and password. We want to redirect to the login page with the message. So I think this should work, but we can't test this now until we register a user and we try to retrieve the user. So before we do this, let's try to get a register route. We'll do register, then we'll do logout. For our register route, we also want to have a message that tells us when things, or that displays our message. We'll set this to an empty string, message equal to this, and then we also want to say if the request method is post, there's a username in it and the password in it, like that in the form. We want to get the values from it. Now, I'm not going to use this also. We get the values of username, password, but this time we want to get the values of username, confirm username, password, confirm password. So we have username, confirm username. Now, let's go to our register form. Why I use C username here is because that is the name of the field. So this name is username, this name is C username, this name is password, this name is C password. So we want to get the value stored in those names. And so we say C password is equal to form.C password. We want to check if the username and the C username are the same. So this is a little form of validation that we do. So we say if username is not equal to C username, we want to put a message that says that user's name do not match, and we want to render register.html file. If the password does not match, we want to do the same thing and render back the template for the user to enter. Once it matches, we want to check the database if the username is already in use, because we want the username to be unique. So we'll say with engine.connect as con, we want to see select all from users where username is that. We're going to fetch one and we're going to commit. Now we're going to say if account, we want to do something. We want to say username already exists and we want to render the template for them to enter new username. Else, we want to check if all of the fields are filled in. So we want to say, let's say if not username or not password, we want to say fill in all of the fields, or not C username or not C password. So we'll say fill in out all of the form. So something like that. So we can use not an else statement, just an if statement. We can use elif because I want to have just if statement. And then if this is the case, fill in all of the form. And then I want to use an else here. So there are many ways you can do this, but the most important part is that you get the logic of what we are doing. So now we want to encrypt the password. We decrypted using the hash password plus secret key, and then we encoded this, and then we said the password is equal to this. So now we want to insert the user in the database encrypted. So we want to look at insert into users name. Let's say we have a table called user name, username, password, and the values. Account successfully created. We want it to redirect to the login page with that message, and if not, we want it to render the page index.html. That means if the request method is not post. Okay, so we successfully done with this, and we have to test to see if this actually works correctly. So the whole logic is to get the values entered into the form. Before you do that, you want to check, do some validation check. Is the method post? Is the username and the password field filled in? If all these things are contained, we want to get the values out of the form. We want to check if the values, if there's any matching we need to do. We want to check the database if we don't want duplicates and see if it already exists, so that it will give a message that it already exists. And if it doesn't already exist, we want to be able to insert it into the database. Before we go further, let's look at our models file. So before this lesson, I have created the user model, which is just going to have a username and a password field. Now refer to week 25 to see how we created models. In week 25, we created the client profile model, where we have a table that holds profile for a client that is just registered. Now I have edited this to be what we want to use. What we did in week 25 was just having a skeletal structure for you to know how to create models. But this is a better way to do it. So in your course resource, you find all of the code for this model. So these are the two models we're going to use. And these are the tables we expect to have in our database. I have set auto increment here to true so that we don't have to enter the value for this when we are trying to enter into our system. And we just focus on entering the username and the password. And the same thing for this. So let's go back to the app file. We have all of this. Login and register route. So now we can come here and refresh because we have a login route. We have the login page displayed without an error. Now the way I designed this form is to have the register on the login like this. So you can switch between tabs. If you want to learn how to design your forms like this, you take course 1. I am not going to go into the details of form design styling in JavaScript in this course. We want to register a new user. Already in my database, I'm going to go into my SQL workbench, and in my database you can see that, let's say, use STI data, and I'll say select all from user. Because it's 2-word, I have to use backtick like this. And so I have in my user database, I already have one user there and the password is encrypted. We want to insert a new user or create a new user. So let's try. Let's say this username is called, let's say, test admin, and want to confirm username, and we say we make a mistake and we just say admin, and then password is, let's say, course123. It can be any password you want, just make sure they match, course123. So this should validate and tell me that this two doesn't match and I can't go forward. So usernames do not match. So I'll enter it again, test admin, password. Let me just use one password so I can keep remembering, course123, or let me say course456 so we can see the password validation, and it doesn't match. So let's do it again. Let me try creating the same one I already have. Mildred should tell me that this already exists. Now I have an error. So I have a wrong name here from this. So I use select all from users instead of user here. So this is where the error is. So I'll save and I will refresh. So always make sure you're able to read your error messages. And so it's telling me account already exists. So you can see what just happened, that I use users instead of user in a particular line of code, and it already gives me that error. When you see that error, it means that something in your code has an error. You have to learn to read your messages and see where it is coming from. So now, because that exists, let me create what I want to create now that doesn't exist. And now we should register this user successfully by redirecting me to the home page. So you can add better messages that will just give you a banner saying that user has been successfully registered. But here you can see that the message went to the URL saying account created successfully. In the future, I'm not going to put this in the URL, but I'm going to put it to be displayed on the page. So this is one of the things that you need to work on during your assignment and your research. When I go back to my SQL workbench and I run this again, I should have the next user, test admin here, and the password hash. Now let's see if our decryption will work when we try to log in. And the password that I use, if that doesn't work, then it means there's a problem. So this has a problem. The problem is the table users. I use users instead of user. So I have to go back to the login route to see where I use users, not user. And this is the place. Save here, refresh. And if this is the only error, so they say could not bind URL for endpoint home with values message. Do you mean overview instead? In my overview route, I have overview.html, but I don't have a home route created yet. So we can use overview instead of home. But I want home when somebody successfully logs in. So I'll do the home route like this. So I want to check if the person is logged in session. I want to render the template home.html, make the username is equal to session username. And why I want to put the username here is I want to send this to the home page so that when I come here to the home route or to the home.html file, I can call that session.username here. So there are two ways to do this. Now, because I used username, I can just call username directly there. So here I'm going to say session.username, since I have username here, session username. Okay? So when I go back to that page and I refresh, you should be able to bind that because now there's a home. So to say register client is not here, do you mean register instead? Why did this say this? Because on my home page, I wanted, let's go back there. On my home page, there is a URL for register client here, has action for a form, which I do not have yet. So what we can do here now is to say, since we know all of the routes that we need, so we've created an index page, the about page, the overview page, the home page, we have the login page, we have the register page. Let's have the logout. And when we want to log out, all we need to do is to set all of the sessions to none, like this. This is just basically how we do logout. We set everything to none. We want to create the, let's say, profile page. So when the we want this to be displayed. We want to create a profile page. When the user logs in and tries to retrieve a client's profile, we want this to be a page that just check if the person is logged in, and we want it to be able to return the form. So what I'll do here is, I'm not going to make it this way. I'm going to make another control this function. I want this function to just display the file, and so I'll just say return render template. So you will see when you start practicing that there are many ways we can do this, or when we start going advanced, but I don't want to make it complex right now on this page. Let's also do for the forms congenital syphilis. We have the route to be congenital _ syphilis. We have hepatitis and STI. So I'll create those routes so that we don't have problems. So we have the route for congenital _ syphilis, and we have dev congenital syphilis, and we want to render that template. We also have for hepatitis, and we want to be able to just render that template for hepatitis. We have a route for STI, which is the one that holds the gonorrhea chlamydia form. So we'll say STI. Now again, like I said, there are many ways to do this. Render that form. We've created the route for home, and we have two major routes we want to do. The one for register clients that will always give us problems because of the form that we have on the home page, and the one for retrieve clients that we want to have on the home page. The home page, what we have on the home page is when the user successfully logs in, it has two forms. The first form is the form that we can use to register new clients, or we can use to retrieve records from a previous client. Now, for us to do this, we need to look at what the models hold. And the model, we have the client's profile model, which has all of these fields. Now, I have used these fields to create the form so that we can retrieve and send information based on these column fields from the form. Now, for us to make this faster, I am going to go to the app file. I'm not going to type this out because it's a whole long thing, but I will start typing out, and then maybe I'll copy and paste what I've already done and explain, which is going to be a faster method so that the lesson doesn't go so long. So I'm going to look at the app here, and I'm going to take out the register client and the retrieve client, and I'll paste that here. So let's look at what I've done here. For the register client route, we check the form. If the method is post and the unique ID, which is needed as a compulsory field, is in the form. We want to get all of the form data, which is on the form. We have a field called unique ID. So if I come here and I go to home, we can see that the name of this form field here is unique ID. So let's go back to the top. So to register a client, the name of the form field here is unique ID. So that's what I'm retrieving. The next name is first name, middle name, last name. So when we come here, we are retrieving, we are putting the names that we put on the form here in all of them to retrieve all of the form fields. Once that is retrieved, we want to check if that unique ID already exists, because we want each client record to be unique to the client. And so we're going to be selecting all from client profile where the unique ID is that unique ID, and we'll fetch that. If it already exists, we want to redirect to the home page, telling the user that that unique ID already exists. We can insert or create a new profile for the client. If it doesn't exist, we want to do something. We want to insert the created at dates to be the date time now, updated at, created by, updated by. There's also a different way to do this, but I'm showing you the easiest method so you can build up. Once this is done, we want to now insert into this record. So we now insert into, you know how your insert query runs in MySQL. You insert into the database table name and all of the column names, and then the values we want to insert into. Because I'm using format string here, I can just pass in the variables directly. We can parameterize this to make it even more secure, but that is something you will learn in the advanced course when we are developing for production. We commit this, and then we want to send a message: you have successfully registered the client. Redirect to the home page with that message, or we render the template home if this is not the case. On the home page, is a second form that allows you to retrieve a client, and this form only asks you for the unique ID of the client. The name is client ID. So when I come here, I want to look at if that form is filled for retrieve client. I want to get the client ID. So here I didn't actually check if the method is post, right? But we'll put in that check. There we get the client ID from the form. We want to check if the person is logged in. If the current user is logged in, if the person is logged in, we want to check if the client ID is filled in. We want to select from the client profile where the unique ID is equal to the client ID that we just collected on the form. And then we want to render template profile. And then we want to send that client. The whole detail we got from the database about the client, all of the column values, we are sending it to the form profile.html. So I told you when I created the profile route that I don't want to use that profile route to extract information. I want to extract information using this route, but send it to the profile page. So the profile route will only render the template profile. So we don't actually need this. except when we want to do something different. This is not a route that we need, but I'll leave it there for you guys to look at it properly and understand what it is I'm trying to do and why I'm putting all of these things together, because these are common mistakes you make at the beginning, and these are common things that will get you confused in the beginning. I'm rendering the template profile.html here, and I'm sending all of the column data from the clients that we retrieved from this select statement to the profile.html file. And when I go to that profile file, I will see that I will now, let me uncomment this. I can now take the client dot the column name. So I want the first name, the middle name, the last name. I can also do client.unique ID like this, and then to display on the profile page. So now that we've done this, let's refresh our page to see if all the error is gone. So it's gone because we have all the routes created. We say hi test admin, we have the 2 forms on the home page. So this is what we always want to see. Now my messages are sent to the URL. This is one thing I want you to do in your assignment 13. I'm not doing it for you, to display the message maybe in a banner at the top of the page. Okay, so you have this form on one side and the second form here. So once you are logged in, you have access to the same home page, the chlamydia and gonorrhea form, congenital syphilis form, hepatitis B reporting form, and then you can log out successfully like this. When you log out, you can log in back. So I'll log in with another profile. Username and password incorrect, because the password hash I used that first time is totally different. So I'll use test admin, and I have it successfully logged in. Now for you to create a new client here, you can do that. You want to retrieve a client by entering the ID here, you can do that. I'm going to go to select all from client profile, and then we're going to see that I have a client profile created previously. I want to get the unique ID, which is client123 here, and let me try to retrieve the client ID, client123. And when I say retrieve clients, it should redirect me to a profile page where it displays the unique ID, first name, middle name, last name, for me to see that I'm getting this. But this is not how we display it. This will now have a form where we are going to remove this chlamydia, gonorrhea, congenital syphilis, hepatitis B reporting to be tabs on the client's page where we can fill these forms, update them, delete them, add new content. So this is where we end this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to look further at how to build this, creating the client's profile, updating the records, and deleting the record. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson.